The Tuatha Danann. Many religions and mythologies have pantheons filled with supernatural deities, such as gods of war, or of the sea, or of fertility. Pantheons such as the Olympians of Greek mythology, or the Aesir of Norse mythology, have infiltrated popular culture and become relatively well known throughout the world. The deities of Celtic mythology haven't quite enjoyed that same level of fame, at least not yet, and the reasons for this are a subject of debate. Celtic mythology covers a massive stretch of different peoples, lands, and time, and it would be exhaustive to list every deity. Specifically for this video, we'll be focusing on a pantheon of deities from Irish mythology called the Tuatha Danann, likely the most well-known of Celtic deities. To begin with, the Tuatha Danann are the peoples of the goddess Danu, which begs the question of who exactly Danu was. Despite being one of the most important figures in Irish mythology, often viewed as a divine creator and goddess of the earth, there is relatively little concrete information about her, and she appears in practically no tales. Irish mythology is heavily fragmented and largely lost to time, to the point of there being no single accepted creation myth. At the very least, however, Danu was important enough to lend her name to the Tuatha Danann. Contrary to what one might think, the Tuatha Danann were not the original ancestral people of Ireland. Their origin differs from text to text, but one source claims them as the fifth group to settle in Ireland, after the previous four were either wiped out or forced to abandon the land. The Tuatha Danann were actually originally members of one of these previous groups, but they managed to escape a deadly war with a monstrous race of beings called Fomorians, and they fled to some islands to the north. Here they lived in 4 mythical cities, and each city contained a druid, skilled in magic and lore, that taught the Tuatha Danann their secrets. Eventually, after they had mastered the arts of sorcery and druidry, they returned to Ireland. They carried with them a treasure from each of the 4 cities. First, the Sword of Light, a weapon that, once drawn from its sheath, none could resist it, and none could escape from it. Second, the Spear of Lu was another powerful weapon that no battle could sustain against it, or the one who carries it. Third was the Stone of Destiny, which would roar out in joy whenever the rightful High King of Ireland would step upon it. Finally, the Cauldron of the Dada was capable of providing an endless amount of sustenance, and no man would walk away from it unsatisfied. The Tuatha Danann arrived in a cloud of dark mist, and it's said that they brought a darkness over the sun for 3 days. The group was led by their king, Nuada, and they burned their ships to remove any chance of them leaving the island, forcing themselves to settle here. They had to contend with the Firbolg, a group that descended from the same group that the Tuatha Danann had come from. The Tuatha Danann demanded the Firbolg either concede half of Ireland to them, or else they would do battle. The Firbolg chose battle, and their first battle raged for 4 days. During the battle, King Nuada's right hand was cleaved off with a single blow, but the Tuatha Danann ended up winning the battle. They offered the Firbolg a chance for a truce, and although they originally chose to continue battling, they eventually conceded and accepted a single province as their land. Since Nuada was no longer considered unblemished due to the loss of his hand, he could not continue as king, and was replaced by Bress. Bress was half Fomorian, the race of monstrous beings similar to the Jotnar of Norse mythology. Bress turned out to be far more loyal to the native Fomorians than to the Tuatha Danann, and effectively turned them into his slaves, forcing them to pay tribute to the Fomorians. Nuada had a silver arm made to replace his lost one, earning him the name Nuada of the Silver Hand, and eventually this was replaced by a hand of flesh once again. After 7 years of ruling, Bress was exiled from the Tuatha Danann, and Nuada retook the throne. Bress went to a king of the Fomorians, Balor, and asked for assistance in retaliation. Balor gathered a large army to go to war with the Tuatha Danann. During the battle, Nuada is killed by Balor, but is avenged by the champion of the Tuatha Danann, Lu. In the aftermath of the battle, Lu comes across Bress, who pleads for his life. Lu spares him only on the condition that Bress share his knowledge of agriculture with the Tuatha Danann. Lu then went on to replace Nuada as the new king. The Fomorians were driven back into their undersea fortresses, and the Tuatha Danann lived in peace for a time. Eventually, however, Ireland is invaded by another group, called the Milesians. They contended with the Tuatha Danann, and eventually a truce is reached. The Milesians will take over the land above, and the Tuatha Danann will take the land below, called the Otherworld. They went into the ancient mounds, called the Sidhe, and in time the Milesians, who became the Irish, simply referred to the Tuatha Danann as the Sidhe, meaning people of the mounds. The Otherworld was known to be a place of everlasting youth and beauty, and the home of the gods. In a number of tales, mythical heroes are given the chance to visit the land of youth, but are forever changed by the experience. While this has provided a certain history of the Tuatha Danann, it's important to understand the nature of Celtic mythology and Irish mythology as far as we have knowledge of it. The vast majority of Celtic mythology has been lost due to the actions of the Roman Empire and the spread of Christianity across Europe. Efforts were made by certain individuals to preserve the folklore and religion of ancient times, but were generally always written by Christians. Although this video has given a view of the Tuatha Danann, it's entirely unclear exactly what the ancient inhabitants of Ireland believed. Future videos will go into further details on a few of the most notable gods, but largely the history of the Tuatha Danann is lost to time.